What's good, Tinfoil Gang? Episode 5 of From is here, and it's called The Light of Day. And guess what? It's finally happening. The townies are actually talking to each other and sharing information.
Oh, snap!
Gotta love it. But before we talk details, this is a spoiler-ridden video, so if that's not what you're looking for, you can always save this one for later and come back when you're all caught up. Also, a quick shout out to the patrons, as always, and a warm welcome to the newest member, Harsh Melon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Your name enlights as promised, and you can also see those producer credits at the end of every video. Really appreciate it. Alright, so we've got a lot to discuss. The townies are restless after hearing Tabitha's story. Fatima seems like she's at her wit's end, and Boyd's got to be the one to stop the crazy bus ahead of guaranteed disaster. And of course, we gotta talk about what happened to Dale. Poor Dale. Anyway, enough yapping, it's time to dive. So just as we expected, Boyd's big decision has come back to haunt him. Randall lives, barely. He's in Colony House and he's pissed, and you really can't blame him. The last thing Randall did was try to help Boyd save Tabitha from the monsters, and this is the thanks he gets. Boyd is disturbed by the entire affair, and the guilt expressed is palpable. He definitely feels ashamed of his choice, and we can be sure there's a lot more where that came from. Kenny and the gang make it back to town the following morning. Boyd mentions to them that Tabitha's back, but while she was on her trip outside, there were some strange trees and a watchtower involved. Now hearing this, Jade immediately dips stage left. More on that later. So Victor and Sarah are making plans to head into the caves below the town. They want to find your favorite dummy, Jasper. Victor believes that Jasper will be able to tell them all the things that he can't remember. Now personally, I don't know that I would trust Jasper to steer me in the right direction, but hey, I don't know him like Victor does. Now we've seen Jasper in the caves with the sleeping monsters. One particular time is when Tabitha got trapped in the caves under the collapsed house way back in season 1. There were a bunch of trinkets and personal items down there too that must have belonged to the past residents. So the question is, what purpose do they serve? Are these monsters trying to hold on to their personal belongings from their former selves? Could there be some power in keeping them down there? Victor is concerned about getting lost in what must be a vast or complicated tunnel system, so he's got a plan to make sure that doesn't happen. So when Sarah and Vic finally reach Colony House, the reception is icy at best. Just look at the amount of side-eye in the scene. It seems like the writers have chosen to pair up these two outsiders, and I kinda like it. This duo plays off of each other very well. Besides, Victor might be the only person willing to associate himself with Sarah. Victor's plans get interrupted when Donna breaks the news to Victor about his father's arrival, and things don't go well. He's in shock, he's not ready to hear this, and he storms out of the house instead. Back at the Matthews place, Tabitha has a chance to debrief the rest of the fam, until a crazed Jade burst onto the scene. Jade wants Tabitha to take him to the faraway tree that she used to escape, because he's thinking it might be the best shot they have at getting out of here. In this scene, one of the funniest moments occurs when Jim mentions that he not only saw the tree, but took a few of the bottles down with the slips of paper in it, and Jade's response is,
And you don't think that's important?
This was hilarious. And I have a feeling this might be a tongue-in-cheek response to the fans who complain constantly about the fact that the townies do not talk to each other enough. I mean, this whole episode is about just that. People are starting to talk to each other, and they're finally starting to make some real progress. I mean, Fromville is a wild place, but I don't see how they escape without everyone sharing what they know. So Kenny and Boyd meet up at the clinic, and Kenny tells Boyd that there's something different walking out there at night around the log cabin area. I got goosebumps for real in this scene. Is this confirmation of a new monster that stays around the area at night? They seem to hint that the next crew they send out will find out. Oh yeah, and Randall is there, and he's in a really bad way. Kenny asks Boyd why the monsters seem to spare Randall, to which he responds, I think it's because they want us to look at him. Randall is essentially a grisly souvenir. He's a reminder of where you've been and what's coming. Boyd thinks they did this so that the townies won't forget potential danger that inevitably arrives at sundown. Maximum psychological manipulation. So there's this big town meeting scheduled for the day, and it's almost time to begin. Everyone's got questions about recent events that need to be addressed, and I think this is a good idea. I don't know, maybe turn this into a weekly thing. This takes place at the diner, and 3 seconds into it, Dale is already running off at the mouth. Things calm down a bit when Tabitha arrives, but it doesn't last too long. She's the person everybody wants to hear from. She begins to explain herself, but the audience is none too pleased with her lack of anything concrete. You can feel things beginning to unravel. So Julie arrives at an empty colony house and heads up to Fatima's room for something to take her mind off of things. But she runs into Elgin, who almost clocks her with a 9-iron thinking she might be trouble. Once again, people are actually talking to each other about their crazy experiences. Please, more. It's interesting to note here that Julie tells Elgin that she hears and feels screaming in her head since the cicada monster attack. We also know that Randall keeps seeing imaginary cicadas. This is all part of the generally accepted theory that this is all part of the same cicada monster effect, although we haven't heard anything about this from Marielle in that regard. So it's a bit later on, and these two find their way to the basement storage, where Elgin says they keep the weird stuff, but he also says he found a chest full of vintage clothes, and later on Julie finds an instant camera that they play with. Two kids just having some fun, right? Wrong, this is Fromville, something terrible will happen. I'm kidding, of course. That camera may come in handy in the future though. One of my favorite scenes of this episode is when Victor gets a chance to explain his reaction to Sarah, and we learn that he's scared that it's been half a lifetime since he's seen his father, and he's afraid that he might be ashamed of him because of how this place has affected him. It's changed him in ways that he thinks his father he won't be able to recognize him. Fair enough, but Sarah drops a bar when she tells him that he's a good man and that should be good enough. Not only that, his father is probably just as scared of how things might play out. So after all of this emotional buildup, the two finally meet and we get a great payoff. Henry runs into Victor and they meet again for the first time in decades, but it's like no time has passed. So as you might imagine, the townies are restless and not at all pleased with Tabitha's lame story. A few blame her for Nikki's death and some for ending up back in Fromville in the first place. Even Fatima is going off on her, so it's getting hot in here. You didn't try hard enough is the gist of it, because they believe she could have done better. Eventually things devolve into a dogpile session, with only a handful of people in the room willing to defend her. A fed-up Tabitha leaves, and not long after that, the Fromville townies begin to demand access to the bottle tree. The mere fact that getting out of Fromville is even possible is enough to trigger a mass migration. And that's exactly what happens. Townies are talking about leaving today, so it's going to be up to Boyd to bring down the temperature before things get out of hand. Foremost among them, Dale is the most determined to peace out. Dale is like, screw your rules, I'm going to the bottle tree right now. And all I could think was, please let this be Dale's final episode. So we're back at the Matthews place again, and Tabitha is having a change of heart. She starts thinking that maybe they were right. She came back with nothing, and that's just unacceptable, according to her. Not so sure I agree, but she's decided to head back to the bottle tree with wholesome Jade. So as we stated, Boyd's got a big problem. Everyone in town seems to be gearing up to leave, and he knows this will probably end up being a colossal disaster, and he's at a loss for how to convince them to cancel their plans. We don't have a first name for her yet. The credits just say Acosta, so we're gonna call her that. Acosta tells Boyd that the townies need a distraction to prevent them from leaving, but Boyd isn't interested in hearing any of it, and then he berates her for even trying. He felt bad about what he did immediately afterwards. That said, this cop is catching way too much flack. Now Henry has a scene where he asks a question that should have been obvious to everyone. If there is a motel sign in this road, why isn't there a motel there? I mean, great freaking question. We see a pool, but no motel. What happened here? And why does it feel like this fact is actually gonna mean something later on? Boyd finds some of Randall's handiwork on the bus in the form of a carved wooden skull. Now, I'm not sure if this is connected, but this should remind us of the skull that Jade saw in the hands of that one-eyed man. This is back when they sprung Christy from the bear trap. Yeah, it was pretty gruesome. If the theory that they are role players in some grand game is true, then maybe this is a clue that Randall's role or fate is connected to the one-eyed man. So there's no real reason to suspect a connection just yet, but it's something to keep an eye on. Now, back at the bottle tree, Jade and Tabitha start to question if the numbers on the slips of paper might be dates. I think that's a good start. Jade also mentions that he saw her and Cooey kids down there, and he felt fear like he'd never felt in his life when he saw them strapped to the giant stones below that marking. A marking that turned out to be roots, and where there are roots, there's also a tree, usually. Just saying. I'm beginning to wonder if these Raggedy and Cooey kids are somehow being used to power this place or the evil that seems to inhabit it. As these two discuss the possibilities, Dale shows up to try his luck with the bottle tree. This is it, folks. It's finally happening. After a few words of warning, a smug Dale smack talks his way right into the tree, but things don't work out as intended. We jump to Boyd and Paata in what seems like a few seconds later, and their conversation is interrupted by horrific sounds in the near distance. Boyd makes his way over to the source, the motel pool, where he finds Dale stuck in the concrete wall of the pool. He teleported from the tree directly into a solid object. Out of compassion, Boyd decides to put Dale out of his misery, but nature beats him to it. At least he got spared this decision this time. I mean, geez, terrible way to go. But if Fromville really wanted to do something truly evil, he would send him back somehow. Okay, yeah, I never liked this character, but that's kind of the point with him. You're not supposed to like him. Still, really rough way to go. I dub the pool boy. The funny thing though, this is happening in the pool, which is another reference to this motel in the same episode. And why in this spot? The thing about motels is they aren't shy and they don't have legs. So where is it? Finding out what happened to the motel could be a major piece of the puzzle for the townies. And what does Dale's seemingly random destination tell us about the trees? These faraway trees don't seem to have fixed destinations, since it appears to be possible to teleport into a solid object. There might be some kind of tuning involved. There must be a way to know how to avoid becoming another Dale, and it probably has something to do with the numbers in the bottle. The numbers could be telling would-be users how to pick destinations or at least go somewhere without, ending up like Pool Boy. Anyway, that's a wrap. I thought this was a really good episode. There was a lot of progress made here that I think will set us up for a good second half of the season. We've been given a few new details to chew on, and some of those need some serious explanations. What's the deal with the motel? Why isn't it in town, and what could it mean that it's missing? And what do you think Cheney heard skulking around the log cabins at night? Are we talking about a new danger or some kind of special monster that only exists near the lake? By the way, I still think this lake is what Elgin needs to find. If he gets sent out as part of the second crew, I think something big is gonna happen. For some reason, I believe this is where the kimono lady is trying to lead him. I think it's a place he dreamt about before arriving. Also, what do the numbers on the slips of paper in the bottles actually mean? What do you think is the trick to making the trees work? And finally, the bonus question. What is the connection between the Raggedy and Cooey kids, the root mark, and the lighthouse? Until next week, be kind to yourself, and until the next time, off you go.